Curiosity led Clara May Hollister down a snow-choked road no map had promised. The wagon wheels groaned over frozen ground, the driver hunched low against the wind. She had been told her husband lived somewhere beyond the Cedar Hills, at a ranch called Silver Creek, or was it Silver Ridge? The ink on the letter had smudged where her tears once fell, but she'd clung to the words anyway, as if hope could guide her better than directions. When the driver pointed to a dark shape rising from the whiteness and said, "That's as far as I go, ma'am," she stepped down, boots sinking deep into snow, heart beating with a quiet terror that felt almost holy. The world was silent except for the wind's whistle between pine branches. A single lantern glowed from the house ahead, its light faint and flickering like a heartbeat in the distance. Clara pulled her shawl tighter and began to walk. She was 25, young by years but aged by disappointment. The orphanage matron used to say she had a pretty face that invited trouble, and the men who passed through her life had proven the words true. Now she was to be a mail-order bride, promised to a widower named Everett Kane. Not love, but survival. That was the truth she had swallowed when she boarded the train west. Her hands shook when she knocked. The sound echoed too loudly, as if it didn't belong to her. After a long pause, the door creaked open, spilling warm lamplight onto the snow. A man stood framed in the doorway, a tall figure in a dark coat, hair tousled from sleep, eyes gray as distant thunderclouds. For a moment, he didn't speak. The cold air between them seemed to hold its breath. I'm Clara May Hollister," she stammered. "Mr. Kane sent for me. I was told this is his ranch." The man's brow furrowed. "Kane's place is 15 miles east of here," he said slowly. His voice was deep, roughened by disuse. "This here is Silver Creek. You've come to the wrong ranch, ma'am." Her heart dropped like a stone through ice. She turned to glance back toward the road, but the wagon had already vanished into the storm's white mouth. The snow was falling harder now, swallowing her footprints as fast as she made them. "I'll find my way," she whispered, though the words trembled with fear. "You won't last a mile in this cold," he said quietly. "Come inside. At least till morning." Something in his tone, gruff yet oddly gentle, pulled her forward. She crossed the threshold, and warmth wrapped around her like a forgotten memory. The cabin smelled of pine, smoke, and leather. A fire hissed in the hearth. She stood awkwardly near the door until he gestured toward the chair by the fire. "Sit," he said. "I'll get you something hot." She obeyed, thawing her fingers against the flames. He moved with the silent assurance of a man used to solitude. When he set a steaming mug before her, their eyes met for the first time. There was no spark of courtship, no flirtation, only the strange, solemn understanding of two people who had known too much silence. "You live here alone?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Luke Calder. Been running this place since my father passed. My wife—" his voice caught, just for a second. "She's been gone 2 winters now." Clara lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry." He shrugged, but his eyes told the truth, grief that never quite left the bones. "You don't owe me sorrow, ma'am. We all lose someone out here. The land takes what it wants." They ate in quiet, the wind rattling the shutters like distant ghosts. She told him how the letter arrived from Mr. Kane, promising a home and protection. She hadn't known how easily such promises could drift astray. When she finished, he studied her a long while. "You've been through something," he said finally. "A woman doesn't leave everything behind for a man she's never met unless she's already lost too much." Clara met his gaze, startled. "Maybe I'm just foolish." He leaned back, the firelight catching the scar that ran along his jaw. "Foolish people don't walk through a storm to find their place in the world." The silence after that was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that made space for honesty. She felt the weight in her chest loosen just a little. Later, as he stoked the fire, she noticed a torn glove on the table. Without thinking, she took a needle from her satchel and began mending it. Her fingers moved slowly, clumsily, but the small act steadied her. Luke paused, watching her in the flickering light. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I needed to keep my hands busy," she replied. They start to tremble when I sit still too long. Something softened in his face. Storm'll pass by morning. I'll take you to Kane's place myself. She nodded, but a quiet ache bloomed in her chest. It wasn't love, not yet, but something gentler, something like belonging. The feeling frightened her. When the fire burned low, Luke pulled a blanket from the chest and laid it near the hearth. You sleep here. It's warmest by the stones. I'll take the chair. She wanted to protest, but his tone left no room for argument. As she settled onto the floor, she heard him move about the room, the steady rhythm of his footsteps oddly comforting. Outside, the storm howled like a living thing. Inside, the world had narrowed to 2 breathing hearts and a flickering flame. Clara watched the firelight paint shifting shadows across his face. The lines of weariness, the quiet dignity in his posture. He looked like a man carved from the land itself. "Mr. Calder," she whispered. He turned from the window. "Yes. Thank you." He nodded once. "Get some rest, Miss Hollister." But rest didn't come easily. The wind roared against the walls, and she wondered if this mistake, this wrong turn, had been written for her long before she left the East. She thought of the letter, the smudged name, the promise of safety that led her here instead. She thought of Luke's steady voice, his kindness unspoken but deeply felt. She closed her eyes and listened to the storm fade, heartbeat by heartbeat. The cold receded. Her breathing slowed. She could sense him still awake, sitting by the window, guarding her through the long night. And though she didn't know what waited come morning, whether Mr. Kane would claim her or the storm would claim them both, Clara felt, for the first time in years, something close to peace. When she drifted into sleep, Luke whispered into the quiet, so softly the words almost disappeared into the crackling fire. "Maybe God sent you wrong so he could set something right." The snow outside deepened, covering every old path, every scar of yesterday, as if the world itself had decided to start again. Dawn crept slow and silver over the hills, laying a thin frost on the windowsill. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the muted scrape of boots on the floorboards. Luke was already at the stove, his movements quiet and efficient, as if silence itself had become habit. She sat up, the blanket sliding from her shoulders, and for a moment she simply watched him, the way the early light brushed his jaw, the calm steadiness in his hands. The world outside still slept beneath snow, yet something between them had shifted, as though the storm had melted more than ice. He glanced over. "You sleep at all?" "A little," she lied. He handed her a mug, the warmth seeping into her palms. "The road's clearer today. We'll head east once the sun's up." Each word pressed heavy against her chest. She should have felt relieved. Safety waited 15 miles away, her intended husband, a roof, the future she had chosen. Yet she found herself wishing the journey would delay, that the snow might rise again just to keep her here a little longer. Luke tightened the strap on his saddlebag, his back to her. "Kane's a decent man," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "You'll be cared for." "I'm not sure that's the same as being happy," she murmured. He paused, the faintest breath catching. "Happiness ain't something folks out here get easy. You take what peace you find." They rode out together as the sun broke through a pale veil of clouds. The air was sharp, carrying the scent of pine and thawing earth. Clara's borrowed coat was too large, the sleeves brushing her wrists, but the warmth inside it still lingered from his body. They didn't speak for a long while. The sound of hooves and wind filled the spaces where words might have lived. Halfway down the trail, the horse stumbled on a hidden patch of ice. Clara cried out, slipping from the saddle before Luke could reach her. She landed hard in the snow, the breath knocked from her lungs. Within seconds, he was at her side, kneeling, his gloved hands brushing ice from her hair. "You hurt." His voice trembled slightly, more from worry than cold. "No," she whispered. "Just startled." He helped her stand, his arms steady around her waist. Their faces were close, too close, and for a breathless moment, neither moved. The air between them pulsed with something unspoken, fragile as glass. Then, slowly, Luke draped his coat over her shoulders, his fingers lingering a second too long. "We'll go back," he said. "Storms turned the trails to mud." It's not safe to push on. She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't command, it was care. And beneath that, something deeper he didn't dare name. When they returned to Silver Creek, the cabin looked different in daylight, warmer somehow, as if the walls themselves had softened. Luke built the fire higher, while Clara set about drying her skirts. The domestic quiet wrapped around them like a fragile thread. Later that afternoon, a rider from town arrived, boots caked with ice. He brought supplies and news. The man said Mr. Kane had been asking about his missing bride, worried she'd lost her way. He'd sent word that she was to be brought to him as soon as found. Luke thanked the rider and sent him off, but his jaw tightened. "You'll be safe there," he said again, though his voice had lost all conviction. Clara studied him. "You keep saying that word. Safe. Like it's enough." He looked up then, eyes dark and wounded. "What else is there?" "Maybe belonging," she said softly. "Maybe someone looking at you and seeing more than duty." Her words hung in the air between them. Luke turned away first, as though afraid that looking too long might make him forget everything he'd promised to endure. That evening, he saddled the horse again. "I'll take you to town tomorrow. From there, they'll see you to Kane's place." She nodded, though every heartbeat whispered, "Don't let this end here." Morning came with a brittle cold. They rode to Cedar Hollow through a fog of whispers and watching eyes. Townfolk paused at the sight of them together, her wearing his coat, him walking a step too close beside her. The widow at the bakery muttered something about propriety. The blacksmith's apprentice grinned behind his hand. In a place where news was scarce, gossip was sustenance. When they reached the church, the preacher came out, brushing frost from his beard. "Mr. Calder," he greeted. "We've heard tell you've taken in a lady." Luke stiffened. "She was lost in the storm. I gave her shelter. And now I'm taking her where she belongs." But Clara stepped forward, lifting her chin. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "He showed me kindness when no one else would. If there's sin in that, then the world's colder than I thought." The preacher studied her face, saw the sincerity burning there, and nodded once. "Mercy's no sin, child. Go in peace." When they turned to leave, Luke's expression had softened in a way she'd never seen. "You didn't have to speak up," he murmured. "Yes, I did," she said. "You've been standing alone long enough." They rode in silence until the town was far behind them. The horizon opened into a white, endless plain. The wind had gentled. The world felt hushed, waiting. Luke stopped his horse and turned toward her. "Clara May, you'll have a roof, food, maybe even comfort where you're going. You deserve all that." She met his eyes. "But do I deserve you?" He froze, the words sinking deep. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he dismounted, boots sinking into snow. "Don't say that," he whispered. "Don't make it harder." "Maybe it's already too late," she said. The wind tugged at her hair as she stepped closer. Every scar of her past, every disappointment, every night she'd prayed for kindness, all of it gathered in the space between them. Luke reached out, hesitated, then let his hand rest against her cheek. "If I were a better man, I'd send you on your way right now. Then be a man who's finally tired of letting life decide for him," she breathed. He closed his eyes, the fight inside him breaking apart. When he spoke again, his voice was rough, stripped bare. "God finally sent you to me." The words trembled in the cold air, fragile yet certain. She stepped into his arms, and the world seemed to still. There was no rush, no grand declaration, only a quiet surrender, a shared breath, the deep knowing that sometimes what feels like a mistake is grace in disguise. When they returned to Silver Creek that evening, the fire was already waiting, as though it had known they would come back together. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and forgiving, erasing the tracks of their journey. Years later, when folks in Cedar Hollow spoke of the bride who lost her way, they said fate had played a strange trick that winter. But those who knew Luke and Clara understood the truth, that sometimes the heart finds its home not where it was sent, but where it was truly meant to stay.